The blizzard came down like a curtain of white knives, slicing through the city streets, as if winter itself wanted to erase every trace of life. Cars crawled, streetlights flickered, people rushed indoors. But Alexander Hale, the ruthless, feared, impossibly wealthy CEO of Hale Industries, stepped out of his black SUV and paused, stunned, as a tiny figure emerged through the storm like a ghost. She couldn't have been more than 7, thin, trembling, barefoot, and hugging a faded pink backpack to her chest. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes like crystals. Her little lips were blue. Most shocking of all was how she stood in the middle of his company's front steps, staring up at him with a kind of painful hope that made his heart do something it hadn't done in years, stutter. "Sir," she whispered, her voice shaking almost as hard as her body. Are you Mr. Hale?" Alexander's security team stepped forward immediately, hands out, ready to remove the child. But he raised a hand sharply. Something about her eyes froze him in place. She nodded, breath fogging in the icy air. "Mama said you're the only one who can help us." The wind howled louder, almost swallowing her words. He blinked. Him? Alexander Hale? The man who crushed billion-dollar deals, fired directors without blinking, and hadn't spoken to a child in more than a decade. "Help you with what?" he managed, his breath visible between them. But before she could answer, her little knees buckled, and she collapsed face first into the snow. Alexander lunged forward, catching her, alarm ripping through his chest. She weighed almost nothing but bones and cold. "Get the medical team now," he barked, scooping her into his arms and racing into the building. Inside the heated lobby, paramedics rushed over. His employees watched their icy, untouchable boss cradling a freezing child with a look that didn't belong on the face of a CEO. It belonged to a man terrified of losing someone. As they checked her vitals, her fingers twitched around the pink backpack. Alexander gently pulled it open and froze. Inside were documents, a birth certificate, hospital papers, and a photo that shattered the remaining ice around his heart. The woman in the picture was someone he once knew, someone he once loved, someone he had failed. The little girl woke with a gasp and grabbed his sleeve. "Please," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Mama said you'd remember her. She said you promised you'd never let her die alone." The room fell silent. Alexander's soul did too, because suddenly he understood exactly who this child was, and what terrible secret her mother must be hiding. And as the snow outside swallowed the city in white, Alexander Hale, billionaire, feared CEO, master of every empire he touched, felt a storm rising inside, him far more dangerous than the blizzard. Roaring outside, the girl's name was Lila, and after the doctors warmed her, after hot chocolate and blankets and frantic phone calls, she finally sat in Alexander's executive office, tiny, legs dangling off the edge of a leather chair worth more than most people's cars. Outside, the city battled the blizzard. Inside, Alexander battled the past. Lila clutched the photo of her mother, Anna, the woman he had once planned to marry before life. Ambition and a ruthless world tore them apart. "Mama got sick," Lila whispered, her voice breaking. She tried to stay strong. "But she said there's something only you can do." Alexander leaned forward, heart pounding. "Where is she now?" Lila's chin quivered. "In an old cabin outside the city. She said she didn't want to bother you until she had no choice left." Guilt hit him harder than the storm outside. He had built skyscrapers. He had conquered markets. He had earned billions. But he hadn't been there for the only woman who ever made him feel human. "Take me to her," he said instantly. Within minutes, Alexander and his best drivers braved the deadly storm. Speeding toward the coordinates Lila remembered, snow hammered the windshield. Roads vanished under white, but Alexander pushed forward, jaw clenched, fear gripping him with every passing minute. When they finally reached the old cabin, the door hung open, swaying in the wind. Lila bolted inside with a cry, "Mama!" The room was freezing, lit only by a dying flame, and on the bed lay Anna, pale, fragile, breathing in shallow gasps. Alexander froze at the doorway, every memory, every promise, every regret slamming into him. Lila knelt beside her mother, sobbing. Anna opened her eyes and smiled weakly. I knew he'd come. Alexander dropped to his knees beside her, taking her cold hand. Anna, why didn't you call me? She laughed softly, painfully. Because you became the man you always wanted to be. And I didn't want to be the reason you fell. A tear slid down his face. His employees would never believe it if they saw their stone-hearted CEO like this. I would have given up everything for you. Anna shook her head. I never wanted you to give up anything. I only wanted Lila to be safe. She looked at her daughter with trembling love. And you're the only one I trust to protect her. Promise me, Alex. He gripped her hand tighter. I promise. With that, Anna's eyes fluttered closed, not in death, but in exhausted relief, as medics carried her to the emergency vehicle. Alexander had ordered. Hours later in the hospital, he sat beside Anna's bed as doctors fought for her life. Lila slept curled in his coat, holding his hand. And in that moment, Alexander Hale made the most important decision of his life. He wasn't going to be a CEO who destroyed people. He wasn't going to let ambition replace humanity. He was going to protect Anna. He was going to fight for Lila, and he was going to rebuild what he lost. As dawn finally broke through the storm clouds, Alexander lifted the sleeping child in his arms and whispered, You're safe now, both of you. Then he looked straight into the imaginary camera, the audience watching this story unfold, and said the words that turn a story into a mission. If you believe every child deserves protection, every mother deserves hope, and every story deserves a voice, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. More life-changing stories are coming.